Medical tourism in Mexico has gained a lot of traction in recent years. It started with people simply going on vacation to beach towns and buying stuff at local pharmacies. Now it's morphed into entire industries where third parties have packages for clients to come across the border, get treatments, and go back home. In some cases, even insurance companies are taking patients across the border to fill prescriptions. This day and age, a lot of people want to take control of their own health, but are extremely limited by their country's system. Others are simply already living in Mexico and want to learn to navigate the system a little bit. Living in Mexico for multiple years, I personally don't think you need to hire a third party to do any of this. This guide provides all the information you need to understand the intricacies of clinic visits, diagnostic services, and pharmacies. We will cover clinics, so finding the clinic for your needs, including services like blood work, x-rays, and MRIs, nutritionist consults, etc., scheduling appointments, typical costs, receiving results, and under pharmacies, finding the pharmacy you need, typical costs, logistics of getting medications, staying safe, and bringing your prescription from the U.S. What's going on, everybody? Good evening and welcome to 3 Deeper Cuts, your lifestyle magazine for the practicing surgical pathologist. I am your host, Chuck G. Every week we bring you something to think about, something to read, or something to listen to. So we got a special guest this time around. I was just reading the intro to an article that he wrote, and the title of the article is Medical Tourism in Mexico, Your Guide to Clinic Visits and Diagnostic Services. And it's brought to you by a gentleman who goes by the name Bowtied Passport. He runs a newsletter that you can find on bowtiedpassport.substack.com. So we're going to just get right into it. There's no major announcements for the week. As you know, we are just deep in the trenches of community practice, diagnosing strange diseases at our campus built on an ancient Indian burial ground. So this conversation kind of stands alone. He's just an interesting cat. He's a former Army logistics officer, went to a military college, took the scholarship, did a lot of his training for OCS before he even got there. Grew up in a military family, so it was a fairly smooth transition for him. And he was a logistics officer, and if you read the stuff that he's putting out there for the travel enthusiasts, you can kind of tell that he's just highly detail-oriented and organized in his manner of communication. And I think a lot of the stuff on his newsletter is directly applicable to the young training physician, the young professional on the come up, trying to get ahead and also balance out a social life. Personally, I did spend some time in Latin America, specifically Nicaragua, during my 4th year of med school. It was one of the greatest trips of my life. I would go back in a heartbeat. But from what Bowtied has described, Mexico City is pretty amazing too. So here we go. Bowtied Passport on 3 Deeper Cuts podcast. 3, 2, 1. All right, Mr. Bowtied Passport, welcome, man. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us on 3 Deeper Cuts. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, Chuck. Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So I wanted to say thanks for sending me the full article that you put down about how any newbie to Mexico can navigate just getting a checkup, getting some laboratory results. And I particularly liked the section that you wrote on Salud Digna. And that's kind of the bulk of the article. And what struck me was that you talk about it. It's not necessarily like the swankiest health clinic, but it seemed like it was the easiest one to use. So could you explain like where the nearest one is to you and how you found out about it?
I mean, there's a lot of them. So I mean, there's probably 3, 4, 5 of them that are close within my area. All of them are probably like within a 15, 20-minute Uber. Some of them do more than others. Like some of them are just lab work, or some of them might just be just a optometrist facility type thing. But the one that I had found did everything. I mean, like radiology, MRIs. Like if you had what are those things for like pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, and all kinds of
Sure.
stuff. I found one that just did everything, so I chose that one. It was the easiest to, also one of the easiest to get to.
Nice.
It just happened to be in a kind of odd-looking neighborhood from the map, but I mean, all of them were in kind of like not the best neighborhoods, I'd say.
Okay. So how long did you have to wait when you showed up there, and what was the appointment procedure like?
Oh man, the process is ridiculously easy. So you can go online, really easy format, drag and drop to the one that you want to go to. It gives you an option to check like which services you want. Like for me, like let's say it's blood tests in this case. You can, you want this packet. No, let's go with the MRIs. You want, these 6 MRIs, drag and drop, tells you the price, instructions of what you need to do. You put in your admin information. You can either pay online or, click to pay there. And then they give you a QR code. And that QR code is just like your appointment. So you come in, you scan your QR code, you go to a desk, and they confirm your stuff. That happened all within 5 minutes. Now, let's say like this particular day, I'm not sure if it's the day or the fact that I came in the morning. Like me thinking I'll come in the morning and be like before the crowd is probably the wrong idea. Like everybody's going to come in the morning. So it actually took like 45 minutes wait before they called me to get seen. And then, I mean, after that, I went in, took the x-rays, and 6 x-rays was in and out in 11 minutes. I think I talked it like 11 minutes. And the guy said like, hey, you can come back tomorrow and we can review them. But either way, they're going to send you everything online. And that was it. So
Interesting.
pretty much, let's say, if I had those all done by like 1 o'clock, by around 10, I had got the first x-ray back. And within the next 2 days, they had given me all 6 x-rays plus like the examiner's notes and whatnot. And I want to say that in total cost maybe $51.
Excellent. And how was the follow-up where you talked to the physician and went over, sounds like you got a complete lab panel, testosterone-free, you got thyroid tests, yeah, so how was the follow-up?
Oh, for the follow-up, there's no follow-up. I mean, I had got the x-rays because I actually went to the chiropractor a while ago, and the chiropractor was like, hey, if you can get these done, that would be great because, one, I don't have my military records. I'm not going to be able to have a military facility transfer over some medical records to a Mexican chiropractor. So I was like, I'll just get it all done on my own.
Yeah.
With the blood test stuff, like again, you don't actually, or, this might be counterproductive for coming from a doctor, but I just took everything on that blood test, the full panel, put it through ChatGPT and said, one, translate this into English from Spanish.
Okay.
Give me an analysis based on the ranges of this and tell me any recommendations or findings that you have. And I mean, all my findings came back fine. There's really nothing wrong with me. I just was like, hey, for the expensive cost of like $26, why not just run a full panel of everything anyway?
And you also at least have a data point right now so that if you should have any issues a year from now or 2 years from now, you at least have a baseline and you're perfectly healthy. And you can show that to the next physician you talk to.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that popped up on the records or on the exam was that my liver functions were slightly off, and I had chalked that up to the fact that I did have a couple drinks the night before, and I figured I should be fine because it says don't need to drink within this many hours. Because I'd had the same blood test like a couple months ago, and everything was completely fine. So I was like,
okay,
I know that's a I probably shouldn't have had those extra mezcals at 10 p.m.
Sweet. So, well, I mean, one thing that your article highlights is just how much of a pain in the ass it is for a lot of people to get access to just basic primary health care in the United States. It's not that fast. It's not that simple. It's a lot more waiting at a big healthcare system. But I did notice that there's a bit of a trade-off. So you're getting your lab results texted back to you via WhatsApp, which is not HIPAA compliant. And you mentioned that in your article that there's not an equivalent of HIPAA in Mexico. So what was running through your head?
There is an equivalent,
okay,
but I guess it's like my question be, well, why isn't WhatsApp HIPAA compliant?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I'll have to research that.
Like let's say typically if you go to a doctor in the States, you get a bunch of tests done. Often they say like, hey, we'll fax it or we'll send it directly to the next doctor, or if you want a copy of it, my last experience is like we'll burn it to a disk and give you a copy of it and you can take that to somewhere. So I say like, well, what's the big difference between that and saying like, hey, just give it to me direct? And if the direct way is straight to my email, that's okay. If the direct way is, you enter in your admin data, your appointment number, and it goes through an automated system on WhatsApp, I don't really see how that's like completely non-compliant, I would say. But again, I'm not super familiar with what HIPAA exactly is when it comes to how information has to be transmitted, but it makes it much more efficient where, if you walk in at 10 a.m. and get your blood test, you're getting those results to your email in a text like within the same day.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, especially people just want care. They don't give a shit if somebody's hacking into it. They don't think of it that way. They think of day-to-day convenience and getting FaceTime with the doctor. I think in most American hospitals, there's like some My Patient Chart or My Chart portal that you have to go through, and then that's where you get your results. But it's slower and it's just less easier to use. They do have an iPhone app, but it's just
tedious.
It's tedious, and it's one extra layer that just annoys people. I'm sure they'd be happier just going through WhatsApp in Mexico. Now, the other issue is that, like, let me give you a scenario, because this came up. So you and I were in the military some time back. This did come up in the military, and people find stuff out about your health problems, and it affects your promotion possibilities. They won't say it, but it does. So I don't. Do you think that applies to people with civilian jobs, like in your industry?
I mean, on the civilian side, nobody gets to see your healthcare records. Like, I would say that would be a HIPAA violation if the doctor sent your healthcare records to somebody else.
Right, they have to have your permission.
But let's say like with the WhatsApp version, it's an automated system. So you text the WhatsApp, it gives you the drop-down boxes, asks you what you want to do. You say like, hey, I want my results. You type in your appointment number, which is given to you on that QR code, and then your birth date and your full name. So it's not like a person is physically on the other line giving you the information. It's still an automated portal system. So I'd say if somebody stole my receipt, had all my admin information, they could probably find out those test results. But in that case, that's not much different than if somebody stole my phone with, the My Chart portal and just opened up the phone.
Right.
So I'm not even sure if, like, beyond that system, who can check that information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for day-to-day stuff, it probably doesn't matter. I think it just becomes an issue, like, higher level when companies and associations have access to your information, and then they can make judgments about you in terms of like offering insurance and what plans you qualify for, or your premiums that you have to pay and stuff like that. But for the traveling tourist or for the nomad, I don't think it's an issue. So the other thing you talked about here is some of the pharmacy options that a traveler would have visiting Mexico City. So you got San Pablo, most expensive. Yeah, so which one do you like to use?
I mean, similar with airlines, I have no loyalty to any one place. I mean, I know some people are like, oh, I only go to Walmart or Walgreens or CVS. The three that I listed in the article, those are just three that easily pop up typically. But I mean, there's probably at least 10 pharmacies that all sell similar stuff. So, like, when it comes to whatever is purchasable, I would say I mentioned using like Rappi, which is the Uber Eats for everything. It also connects to pharmacies. Just type in what you want, and it'll give you kind of every pharmacy that has those things available, and you can just price check right there and decide like, oh, I want to buy from this one because it'll only get here in 25 minutes, and there's no fee if I buy more than $6 worth of stuff. So there's enough pharmacies. The only kind of negative, or not negative, but thing to look out for is, if you're going to a beach town, Playa del Carmen, Puerto Vallarta, or something like that, anywhere in the Riviera Maya area, there's always those kind of like random pharmacies that are going to have a big sign out front saying like, we sell Anavar and HGH and all kinds of stuff like that. Those ones, I mean, I'm not going to say that they're sketchy, but it's kind of like make your own decisions on if you want to do that. Of course, some people have quoted reports of like, oh, they bought something with fentanyl or something inside it. That's extremely rare, and it's more likely that like they did that for the article because, I mean, millions of people visit Playa del Carmen, Cancun every year. If people were really lacing all the drugs like an aspirin with fentanyl, like you'd have way more cases than, once every 3 years type thing. But
Sure.
I mean, I'm just slightly sketchy when it comes like, would I buy like Deca and HGH from a pharmacy that just is going to give it to me out over the counter? Like, no. But at the same time, if you do want to get, testosterone in Mexico, you have Sustanon and Primatestin. Those can be bought over the counter at like a legit pharmacy. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's almost like I'm not saying that it's like that specific pharmacy is sketchy. It's just I probably wouldn't want to buy something where they market it in the window.
Right. So where would someone go if, like, let's say you have a guy he's in his 50s or maybe early 60s, and he legitimately just wants, to go see a longevity clinic. Do any pop into mind in your area in Mexico City?
I could not give you the names of them at all off the top of my head, but
Sure, yeah.
it's something where you can type it in on Google. You could type in longevity clinic on Google Maps, or I say, if you want to find one that, if you speak Spanish, type it in Spanish, like Google Translate it, the word, put it into the map in Spanish. Those ones are usually cheaper, and you'll be fine. I mean, fortunately, I feel like the Mexico market kind of self-regulates, where if you've got a shitty product, you quickly go out of business. Like if you're a
Gotcha.
food vendor that's selling shitty food or somebody gets sick, like you're either going to go out of business very quick, or somebody's going to just come and beat your ass because you're standing out on the corner selling old hot dogs, something like that.
That's awesome. Well, so I think the message I'm getting from you is that you would want to basically acclimatize yourself and find out where the Mexicans who are doing well and are of a similar demographic as you, like what clinic would they go to, and then get to know that clinic, because I think if you were going to go on a hormone replacement therapy, you definitely want a physician who that's the core of their practice and they know how to titrate the doses, and it's not just like one drug that you're on. There might be like 3 or 4. So
So, I mean, in that case, I'd say, like, if you wanted somebody to maybe do it for you, then, like, one of the bigger clinics or pharmacies is called San Pablo.
okay,
I mean, they have an option where, if you aren't comfortable with needles, you can pay, like, a couple of dollars, go there, give them whatever prescriptions you are, and have them administer it for you.
okay,
I mean, I've never used that service. I eventually found it out just kind of like Googling through and reading the website, but I was very surprised. It's like, yeah, for a couple of dollars, you can just say like, hey, I don't want to do this myself. Can you review this stuff and do it for me? And they'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not recommending anybody fly down to Mexico right off the bat and start doing tests. But if you were going to do that, maybe send a message to Bowtied before you go down there. But hey, man, I want to get to some of these questions that I wrote down about a week ago. So you don't just write about getting healthcare in Mexico. A lot of the stuff you talk about is dating and meeting women as an expat or just as a traveler in Mexico and Latin America. So we seem to have a similar philosophy. I'm kind of past that stage now, but I'm curious, when did you start being more intentional about building like a solid female social circle in Mexico?
Let's see. I almost wouldn't say it was intentional. It was more of a, like, I like to do things, so why not find people that want to do things for me? And let's say, I want to go play putt-putt golf or something like that, mini golf. For whatever reason, it can sometimes be hard to get like a group of guys to be like, yo, let's go play mini golf for the day. So I always start asking some of the female friends I'm there. And then, of course, they're like, oh, I want to invite one of my friends. I'm like, okay, I don't really care, bring whoever you want. And then start from there. Like, let's say everybody can acknowledge that, quote, like, women are the currency for, events in my life and things like that. So if I decide I want to go out to a bar or club, of course I'll just invite a couple of the girls that I know. They don't necessarily have to be like people that I'm dating. It's just like, hey, let's all go out because we'll have a better chance of all getting in type thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But I noticed there's just a gap within the travel circle of people, coming to a city like Mexico City with 9 million people and then saying if they're, alone or they don't have a lot of people to go out and do stuff with. So, of course, I started writing about, how to build your social circle from there. I mean, it's not just girls, it's guys also. Like, I'll say, just go out and play soccer. And even if you suck completely, like I am absolutely trash at soccer. I'm going to look horrible with a group of Mexicans at a soccer field. But, like, hey, you're going to end up with some nickname, invited out to a couple beers, and maybe you'll meet a couple of guys from there. So the more writing was to help other people get a basis, I guess, of things you can do versus going purely to expat venues and events where a lot of the people that are there are usually short term. Like, they might stay for a couple months and then dip out. And, after a while, it kind of gets to the point, like, I'm not really interested in making friends with people no matter what they say until they've been here for at least like 6 months. Because very often they're like, oh yeah, I just moved here. Like, I love the city. I'm going to stay for a while. And then they either don't manage their money, have to leave, or, they didn't have that long to actually be remote, or their job calls them the office, or they're people that are more travel bug oriented, where, like, they're always trying to catch the next new thing. And I don't really consider myself a nomad. Like, I've traveled around for so long in my life that I'm completely fine staying still in one place. So I'm not going to be bouncing to another place within 3 weeks.
I got you. That's awesome. Hey, man, can you your volume is a little bit low. Are you able to?
Oh, my bad.
Scoot a little closer. Cool.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's way better.
I like stood up and started walking, and the mic was on the table.
Oh, no worries. All right. So, okay. So the people listening to this podcast, it's a handful of practicing pathologists, there's some residents, training doctors, med students, and then young professionals in other industries and stuff. So what would you say to like a young person who, has been down there for about 6 months and, like they're one of those people that maybe they have like some mental block about leaving the expat circle and immersing themselves a little bit more. Because I'm sure you've encountered someone like that before. What would you say to them?
I mean, of course, the first step is like learn Spanish. It's almost played out as much as people say it, but you don't need to be fluent. You just need to have like a solid basis so you can get out of that area. And then, I mean, there's people are very happy, helpful, etc., to either help you or hang out with you and whatnot, because so few of the expats actually leave the expat bubble. And that it's like very refreshing for locals to like meet a person that wants to, learn something outside of just the tourist bars and whatnot. So there's not like a big step to it. It's just like, hey, go to the park. Maybe there's a dance class or boxing class, something like that going on, or go to I almost even say like in my area or my like spectrum, go to somewhere more higher end because typically the foreigners aren't going to higher end places. And I mean, higher end does not mean it seems like America prices. It's still relatively good prices.
Okay.
And you're gonna meet a lot of locals that you can have conversations with at that level that are also higher class. Like these are going to be middle, upper middle, sometimes even richer people within the city. And typically they're just going to say much more interesting things than what do you like to do for fun?
Got you. You're elevating, basically. You're elevating your circle and putting yourself out there. Okay.
I always say like I am not the traveler that's trying to find the best deal. Like I'm not trying to figure out where I can stretch $20 or whatever the most, and then I'm on a limited budget. So I'm not really bothering with the not saying it in a negative way, but I'm not bothering with like the lower class areas of society. Like I'm typically going to be trying to find a more upper class area. That's also doubly for like if you decide to do business. You're probably not going to be making friends with a street vendor to do business. You're probably going to want to go to a higher end place where somebody probably works in business or has some connections themselves, like as a local.
Absolutely. No, that's the objective. I mean, this is you're trying to get ahead. You obviously want to increase your elevate your social circle. So
if you've made enough money. Like, let's say statistically, the average American has less than $1,000 in their bank account. So, let's say, like, maybe half of Americans have passports. If you have got to a place where you have the disposable income to travel, that means that you're already a step ahead of the average American. So, why would you go to a foreign country and associate yourself with not even, like, the very average of that society? Like, you should be trying to find the upper side of the society, or at least the people that are going to be on par with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be hanging around people that are smarter than you, better than you, faster than you, more successful than you. I mean, that's how you get better. And plus, they're probably going to speak Spanish very well and fast, and it'll force you to up your game.
Yeah, now I'll say nobody's in Mexico is going to be faster than me.
Oh yeah,
I don't think. I think I've just got too long of legs. Like nobody's gonna run faster than me.
I know. All right, so I kind of wanted to back up a little bit. So, can you just talk a little bit about like what it was like getting out of the Army, and then what you actually chose to do for work that allowed you the flexibility to move to Mexico City full time?
Yeah. It's let's see. So I didn't have a standard path, I guess. I went in as an officer one. So the officer side is more relaxed, much more freedom, and you're typically kind of going to be within the officer class even outside of the military. So, I mean, a lot of my friends were already working in tech, sales, consulting, and things like that were non-military.
Okay. So
my transition was probably relatively easy. I mean, I had a lot of people to talk to, a lot of people to bounce ideas off of. I mean, I had already done the bulk of my commission time period, so I had started taking or like joining, I guess you could say, organizations. There's like the 4 blocks, which is like more on consulting, maybe like Breakline, which is more based on tech project management and things like that. I joined a bunch of different organizations, kind of asked a lot of questions to figure out which was areas. And then I decided on sales. I mean, I had read an article a long time ago from, if anybody's familiar with Bowtied Bull is the name they go under now, but previously they were Wall Street Playboys.
Okay.
They had an article on like career choices. And it was, what do you want to do to make the most money the most efficiently? And one of them was, say, you become an engineer. Computer science, you can always do that somewhere. Another one was, say, go into like finance, and then another one of them was sales. And I figured I am not that great at math, so finance is probably not that area for me. And I also don't want to work 80 hours a week. I'm not going to be an engineer because, again, I'm not that great at math, so I'm not going to be doing computer science, and I don't really want to sit in front of a computer like that long. And then there was sales, and I was like, okay, well, if you can, quote, convince a soldier to come into combat with you, and he doesn't throw a grenade in your tent, I'm sure I can talk to customers and sell them a product.
That's awesome.
And then from there, I said, well, what are the two areas of sales that are going to produce the most money and like the most efficient use of my time? And it's going to be like medical and tech. And I said, well, a lot of people in my family are already kind of in the medical side. I am not trying to go to a hospital and, be in a hospital for hours at a day. Often medical sales is like more remote locations. Like, yeah, you can make $250,000 a year, but you're going to be in like Kansas or something like that, visiting some the five-star hotel or five-star hospital group or something like that. And I was like, I'm not trying to do that. So tech was the next choice. Is like, okay, this already has potential to be remote. It makes a lot of money, and I don't see tech ever going away. Even if it changes in field, you're just going to be able to, move to a different field. So, I mean, I went into the tech side, and I had actually originally had a business in consulting. I essentially just stole the military's version of troop leading procedures and whatnot and used that as a consulting philosophy. So when I started applying for tech companies, I could say like, hey, I'm not coming in at the ground floor of was a business development rep. Like, I have already been working in my own business. Here's some information on the revenue that we produce. And I went directly into a FANG, like as my first job out of the military based on prior experience, which is very rare. So I don't really write about how to get into tech sales because I would say it's not the norm for somebody to have zero formal sales experience or tech experience and then come into a sales organization as like a senior member. But that's kind of how I came in. And I mean, from there, of course, being a senior member in a sales organization gives you a whole lot more freedom, a whole lot quicker, where I could say like, hey, I'm going to work from home, or hey, I'm going to this place. And then at a pure, stroke of luck, COVID hit right as I was coming to a new job. So that kind of just set my career in motion to be like permanent remote versus, hybrid remote or like remote near an office.
Okay. So could you dumb this down a little bit more for like somebody who's not in tech or in sales? Like what products are you selling to companies? Is it B2B or B to consumer?
It's always been B2B. It's always been something cloud associated. So whether it's like security, optimization, the actual clouds, like infrastructure for service where you're like AWS, I'd say the very easy broken down way is, if you've got, let's say, Uber on your phone, Uber app opens up, you type in the direction you want to go. It's got a link to some sort of microservice for, satellites, the database for the maps, then there's database for the drivers and you, and all that gets linked together. Infrastructure as a service is everything that's built on. So that ground level where all these services are built on. And that's what I essentially am like consulting companies or helping them purchase the products. So now I'm more on the private consulting side where I'm helping the company build their sales organization and then also like advising them on how to build their infrastructure, which gives me a whole lot more free time.
Okay. So I'm a little
still
bit
kind of complicated.
It's still kind of complicated. Like on a knuckle dragger. So, okay, I'm a guy who just got out of the Army, and you already talked about some organizations to join. You went in as an officer, so you had kind of like an alumni network, both from your college and from the military. And then you basically networked into a sales organization. You mentioned you were already doing some consulting work. What exactly were you consulting on?
So this is way back in the day, like over 10 years ago when Bitcoin blockchain was very early. And anybody that was around way back then would be familiar with like ICOs, which is kind of like an IPO, but for anything crypto related. And companies, I would just say, are absolutely dumb. I mean, you have some great engineers, but they have no idea how to build a roadmap for their product, no idea how to sell to customers, acquire funding. So I would essentially help build them or help them build some sort of roadmap, execution strategy for their company. In exchange, I would want a portion, like a percentage of, their release, or, a percentage of just upfront sales right up and up there. So, I mean, within that period, let's say, a year period, I could acquire, 20 small companies and do over $1 million in revenue in a year, because the market was absolutely Wild West. I mean, it's similar to now where you have like everybody's just launching some soul-based coin for memes. It was similar to that, where people were like, oh, this is a good idea. Okay, we'll throw a 300K into it. Like, oh, this is a good idea. We'll throw $1 million into it. So if you're just taking a percentage of, a $300,000 raise, and that instantly 10x's overnight, it's like, okay, you'll get a little chunk of change to stick into your account.
Got you. Okay.
And also, I would say, like at this time, traditional sales companies, traditional tech companies are very unaware of blockchain. So was easier also to kind of explain this to them and be like, hey, this is the company, this is what we're consulting, and we've done over $1 million in revenue in the first year. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, well, we want this guy on our team because we also want to get into, cloud, blockchain, tech, stuff like that.
Okay.
So it was a bit of like luck, experience, and skill that I was able to easily just transition over from the military into a company where, like, I can also be transparent, because I say the transparency helps other people know what they're looking into. But say first job offer, official job offer out of the military was a $200,000 total compensation, wow. Which is also, again, very like unheard of, but it's not impossible. And a lot of people just aren't aware that, those are possibilities that you can do to begin with.
Interesting. So I'm assuming you were kind of dabbling in cryptocurrencies while you were still in, which is kind of how you got familiar with the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you're basically just using that, leveraging that with private companies who want to experiment in that space. So how long?
100%, yeah.
So how long roughly? Are we talking like 3 to 5 years since you got out? Like that was your gig?
Say it like I guess.
So how long were you doing that consulting gig before you switched to the type of thing you're doing now?
I did the consulting maybe like 2.5, 3 years. Like I was still in the military when I started, and then when I got an official job, I stopped. I also stopped because the crypto environment started getting more regulated. So, the IRS, SEC, et cetera, started asking questions, and nobody knows how to manage that stuff. And the quote lawyer that I had within my company was actually a friend of mine that was a prosecutor. So when we started getting questions from like actual financial litigations, we were like, all right, we're in over our heads. Let's just pay whatever taxes we owe, and then we'll slowly start to close up shop until we figure this out. And around that time, it was like, okay, now I've got a new job, and he's, getting further in his law career, so it didn't really matter as much.
Got you. Okay. So when you finally made the move down to Mexico City, then you have like this flexibility. Were you totally on your own, or did you come down with some friends?
Good question. So I'd say a lot of the expats, foreigners, etc., that do move to a different country, they're moving for a bunch of different reasons, and they're often coming alone. I say, like, I didn't move to Mexico City alone. I had a friend of mine that was actually like kind of under my command like a decade ago, and he had moved down to Mexico City. I had another guy that I lived in Hungary for a period of time, and I met a guy that was like working at the embassy, and after 8-9 years, he ended up in Mexico City also. So I had kind of just said, like, hey, it's kind of like, earlier COVID days. I'm going to take a vacation. Mexico City is like relatively relaxed on COVID laws. And I came down to spend 2 weeks with some friends, help him, launch one of his companies down here. And then I extended it for the rest of the month. And then after the month, I said, like, I'll just apply for residency and, like, stay long term. I mean, I've got cash flow, so I'm not really worried about that. I even looked at it as like, hey, my job is currently not really caring that I'm in Mexico right now, so I'll take advantage of that. And, 3 years later, I'm just still here.
That's awesome.
But I'd say I kind of had a slight, small social circle that I could kind of jump into. I mean, having a couple people here already, they could introduce me to stuff, give me a little bit of the lay of the land much earlier than if I just showed up completely like innocent.
Absolutely. I think that's a really positive message that a lot of people wouldn't think of, but it sounded like it happened somewhat serendipitously for you, that you already knew these folks professionally from a long time back. My hunch is that that made the decision to stay longer much easier than it otherwise would have been.
I'd say it didn't make the decision easier because, I mean, of course, these are friends of mine that I've known for 10 years, but, I'm not going to say that we hang out every day type thing. But it's also, a friend of mine, a former soldier of mine from the military. So there's kind of that built in, like, yo, if you ever do need anything, you can always call on me. So it wasn't the decision was that I got here and I just love the city. I mean, the architecture is great, the people are great, food is great. It's very like a New York City amount of things you can do and get into, but a almost smaller town environment of how friendly people are and how quickly you can, get things done if you really want to get something done. So it was more of a combination of that. And then again, I mean, I moved during COVID, so there wasn't a big incentive to go back to the States in the middle of COVID at the same time. So as time just went on, it was like, I'll just stay here longer and longer. And then even though COVID eventually, or the pandemic kind of relaxed, I was like, now there's even less incentive for me to go back. Like, I've already built a lot of stuff here now.
Got you. Okay. Well, that's even better. And so now my next question is that did you have a feeling from the beginning that Mexico City is the greatest, then that's where you wanted to be? Or did you arrive to that decision by exploring other cities in Mexico and concluding that this is just an awesome city with like New York caliber lifestyle and culture? Was it by comparison, or was it just like a no-brainer when you got there?
I'm about to say it was a little bit of both. I mean, again, I'd say let's go further into the background. It's like, from the military standpoint, I didn't travel a lot. I mean, people say the military gives you all these opportunities to travel. Like, that wasn't my travel intent or like the reason for travel. Like, I was traveling early on in life. Like, from a kid, I would visit other countries with my family. Like, I studied partially in Germany at that point. Say, when I'm waiting for my officer's slot, I moved to Hungary and I lived there for almost a year. So at that point, I mean, I had been to most of Europe, almost all of Europe, even portions of Eastern Europe, kind of a little bit through Asia. So getting to Mexico City wasn't more like I need to explore a lot. It was more like I've got experiences from, 20 other countries to go off of, and Mexico City tops out a lot of those places. So there's not really a point in me traveling too much. I mean, of course I did, visit other areas in Mexico, other cities and whatnot. But for the amount of stuff that you get out of Mexico City, it was that at that point it was where the no-brainer kicked in. It was like, there's no reason to leave. Like, I'm also not interested in, going to live in a beach town where it's all tourists and everybody just wants to party the entire time. I'm not really trying to go to a small town where, it could be significantly cheaper, but there's nothing to do. And I've still got ties to the States. I mean, I still kind of like actively run. Most of my clients are in the States. At the time, I'm flying back to random cities in America to do business and whatnot there. So I wasn't really interested in jumping further south into, like the Colombia, Argentina and things area, because I'm not trying to take a 12-hour flight for a business meeting when I'm going to stay there for, a weekend. So Mexico is also a combination of like I can still efficiently do business from Mexico. Like I can take a flight from Mexico City and be in, DC, New York City, LA, wherever within 5 hours versus, 10 plus hours from continental South America.
Got you. That makes a lot more sense. So the
I do have
practicality.
an article somewhere about that also where I talk about, people that if you're a complete lone ranger, yeah, like I can see if you want to go somewhere that's 12 hours away. But, let's say you've got family and whatnot in the States. If there is an emergency and you've got to get back quickly, you're going to have to spend an exorbitant amount of money and take a 12-hour flight to get from South America.
I see. That makes Mexico City a lot more attractive. So, where are you from in the States?
I say nowhere in particular, and that's not just to be like jokingly. It's just that my dad was also military, so every couple years of life, I lived in a different city also. So it's also not a big issue for me to jump to a new city and stay because I'm used to like, hey, we're going to live in Texas for a couple of years. Hey, we're going to live in Germany for a couple of years. Oh, we're going to New York or somewhere like that. We were always bouncing around. So I don't really claim anywhere specifically, but I mean, if I had to, I claim Texas as that's where I lived the most out of my life.
Hell yeah! All right.
Which is only like 7 years.
How far is it from Dallas? That's like a couple hour flight, right?
Oh man, I want to say that might be 3 hours.
That's amazing. Fucking love it. Yeah, Texas is awesome. That's where I'm at. So you grew up around military. You was that a main reason that you went to, you joined in college and went through that program?
Actually, no. Surprisingly, no. I mean, my
Okay.
family never really pushed me to take the military option.
Okay.
I actually just chose an area where I had some family also living that was far enough that I could get to school, but not so close that my parents would come and visit me per se. And not in a negative way. I just know that like if I went to a school that had any sort of party representation, that my mom would probably want to show up and be like, hey, take me out to a bar or something like that. Take me out to some restaurants. And I'm like, nah, Mom, I'm not trying to hang out with you during college. And then, I mean, my original plan was actually to work in banking. So I said I lived in Germany for years. For whatever reason, my young mind was like, hey, Germany's got great banks. I'll learn German and maybe get into the banking system. And I ended up not going to banking because I just realized Germany is a very boring place to live, very, very boring culture. And that was also what ended up with how I started jumping around into Europe and whatnot, just kind of bouncing to random countries and living there for a little while. I mean, my school was like very relaxed on how we did things. I had scheduled like all of my classes to be within 2 or 3 days a week, so I could travel for 4 days a week pretty much.
Nice.
And then, I mean, around the time period when I was graduating was sequestration years. Like the government just didn't have budgets for a lot of stuff, and they were just like, what am I going to do? So the military as an officer was actually just a great like opportunity. Like, let's say you have engineer friends. My engineer friends, if you weren't going to go work for like Lockheed Martin, you weren't getting a very high paying job, or you weren't even getting a job period in like that economy. So the military is like, where else are you going to get paid, $70 grand right out of college to blow stuff up and have fun?
Yeah.
So the military route was more of like, hey, this is a solid option to make money. There's some benefits involved. I can, knock off the rest of my student loan debt and whatnot. And I took it. So there wasn't like a massive, amount of like, oh, I'm really patriotic or like I really want to serve or anything like that. It was more of like, hey, this is a great opportunity and I enjoy it.
That's awesome. So did you, what was your specific rate as an officer?
I left as a captain.
And
which is 03, would be an 03, I guess, considering, like I think Navy is captain is like a 07 or something.
Or I should say MOS. Like, what did you run?
Logistics. So logistics and EOD.
Nice. That was I was a medical officer for a logistics battalion. So yeah, those were my homies, man. They kept me out of trouble. Nice.
I mean, I'd also say originally I planned to be a pilot. I had, took all the tests, scored high. The intent was I'll go to aviation school. But again, the government just didn't have money, and they were like, hey, if you want to get a pilot slot quick, you're going National Guard somewhere. And I was like, I'm not going National Guard.
Yeah.
So I sat around for like almost a year trying to wait for a slot to open up, and it didn't open up. And I was like, all right, I'll take my third choice, which was logistics. It was aviation, then it was going to be medical service, because medical service has a back door to get into aviation medical pilots. And then my third choice was logistics, simply because that's a job that's very transferable outside of the military. I mean, like, yeah, everybody wants to go infantry, some sort of combat arms, but there's not as much to do after that. I mean, by captain, you're going to have Walmart, Target, all the other logistics entities trying to poach you for like 160 to leave. So I was like, this is probably a better choice long term. But I mean, it's not to say that like logistics gets counted out. I mean, logistics and EOD is always in the field. They're still always deployed depending on where you go. So you're not missing out on anything at all. I mean, during the kind of like bulk of the heavy combat years, the logistics actually had more deaths and casualties than other branches, because logistics is way more placed on the battlefield versus combat arms.
Wow. So what
A
specific...
lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that about the Army, but what specific logistics stuff do you felt like made it? I mean, you talk about your career in tech sales and everything like as easy, but I mean, I know it's more complicated than what you're saying. So what were some of the background skills that you felt transferred the most?
I mean, like logistics is simply, I say, like battlefield planning. So let's say the very simplest thing is, say, like running a range, or like a weapons range, or a convoy or something like that. You're going to be meeting with your team, weeks in advance to make sure all of them know all the moving pieces. You're going to have to delegate those people out to certain tasks. You need to have, medical, the armorers, the actual team that's going to run things, safeties and all kinds of stuff. People are going to have to be trained on, radios, vehicles. There's like a long list of things that go before you even get to the actual day. And then on that day, let's say the lower side of the officer ranks, the lieutenants and sometimes the captain, are going to be on that convoy, like actually operating and manning all that stuff like that. So to be able to that keyword of cross-functionally manage all of those teams together makes it a whole lot easier when you jump into the sales world, where you're going to have to talk to, possibly finance, the legal team, the C-suite, maybe the management or directors area. All those people have to be on track at the same time. You have to manage their expectations and, their wants and needs, which is very similar to managing like the military's expectations and, your higher command and lower command's expectations and needs to get everything done. And I think that that's like a skill that, say, in the military, you built that extremely fast. Like, let's say when I got off the bus, or, I got off the bus to my first duty station, would have been on like a Sunday, and they told me next Saturday you're running this weapon range. So immediately you're out in the field from there. If you were to just graduate from college and, find a job, typically you're going to an office cubicle type thing, and you're under somebody else and they're doing all that stuff and just kind of divvying you out the task. So even when you do leave the military, let's say you leave after, 4 or 5 years, you're competing with the person that might have more sales experience than you, but that person may have been in a junior position for the first 2-3 years of their period, where they have no like leadership and management skills. They just kind of have that independent contributor skill.
Right.
So there's a big leg up for officers in NCO within the military, because you've already have a lot of experience managing teams, managing like a lot of expectations, being timely to get that stuff done, and then actually like executing it. And I mean, execution also becomes hard for a lot of people, because, even if you plan it, you have to understand, that the plan only works up until contact. So if anything goes wrong in the business world, people are haphazard jumping into a whole lot of extra things. In the military, it's kind of like, well, nobody died, so I don't really see what the
Yep.
the big deal is right now.
It makes everything seem easier once you get out and apply those skills to civilian jobs and running your own shit.
Yeah, there's much less stress because of that.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm just a huge advocate about, I mean, this is more of kind of a medically focused podcast, but I mean, the logistics community was my home too, man, and I learned everything that I know about just planning projects in my world, all from my logistics officers. They just kind of lifted me up, because the Army captain, by the time you're in 03 or a Marine Corps, I was green side, so it was Marine Corps captain in 03. It's like, by the time you make it to 03, you've been thrown under the bus. You had to deal with all kinds of shit sandwiches that 90% of your civilian counterparts, your same age and education level, have just never been through. And it's the greatest gift to experience that early in life, because you just totally have a leg up.
Yeah, so that's where it was like kind of course, there's some backlash, getting out and getting a great job like that quickly, where like a lot of my friends are like, yo, you like got promoted over me essentially with no experience. And it's like, well, I mean, you've kind of been at a cubicle for the last 3-4 years, so versus independent contributor, the thought of me coming to the first company that I did was, the intent was that I would spend time in that position and go into management. The whole time I had no interest in going to management. I just kind of played them and took the extra money. But that was like a kind of a big reason. They were like, okay, we're going to give you the senior position because we want you to help start managing the team, and possibly go into management within 2 years or so.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that sounds fine. But I was like, nah, I'm not trying to manage people.
You're smarter than that. Like you dealt with that stuff, running a team, the human element.
Like, yo, and in the military, if somebody says no, it's like I can kind of like strong arm and force you into doing it. In the civilian world, I can't strong arm somebody to get this task. I can't just like cuss somebody out. I can't call my first sergeant and be like, yo, handle this for me.
Exactly.
Because I'm gonna hit this kid if he doesn't do this.
Yep. Fucking love it, man. So I was in a similar position where in medicine we have this chief resident job in a training program where they wanted me to do that shit, and I was like, no, I'm gonna ride this out and work on this other stuff. So I'm gonna start wrapping it up. There's a couple other questions I wanted to.
We can wrap it up when you want. I say I've got time, so if you want to extend it,
okay,
I'm fine to talk. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm excited to have you on here, man. I just want to be respectful of your time too. So, how would you rate navigating the military health system to navigating what you have now?
Still complicated. I mean, you know this firsthand, that the military very much de-incentivizes people to go get their medical checks and anything done. Like there's a big don't be a bitch, don't go in and go to the medical like after Ruckmart or something like that. It's also still complicated even to get, I would almost consider like basic things done, like blood work in the military, because the doctors are still going to be similar. They're going to be like, oh, no, you don't need that. Like, here, just go to physical therapy, or here, take some Motrin, stuff like that.
Yeah.
The system's got so much like negative redundancy. I don't think that's really a word, but I'm going to use the word negative redundancy, where the systems are redundant, but they still don't work.
Right.
The systems can be redundant, and it's still a bunch of hoops to jump through to get anything done. So, I mean, that compared to now, where, I mean, honestly, a lot of people have trouble with the VA. I thought that the VA system was better run than some military systems, like active duty systems.
Yeah,
now, compared to the Mexican system, like I'll also say, I am just in a fortunate situation where like I have the time and the money to do things that I need to do, where I can definitely say, maybe for the absolute average income Mexican that makes, $500 a month, maybe, getting a couple x-rays done for $50 is a much bigger deal. But I mean, I'm in the fortunate position where like $50 is not a hassle for me to go do.
Right.
And the ability to just, throw in a group chat and say like, hey, can anybody recommend a dentist? 5 people recommend a dentist. You message that dentist on WhatsApp. The dentist is like, oh yeah, I can see you in 2 days. Here's my office. Go in and get a dental appointment and walk out spending $40 to get a cleaning and some dental x-rays. It's a no-brainer. Like which system would I prefer? Like, okay, yeah, sure, that person might not be, quote, as professional, but it's not like they didn't go to medical school. It's not like they didn't go to dental school.
Right. It's an excellent deal, and it's so close by. I wanted to kind of shift a little bit to some of the stuff that you wrote about, because this also resonated with me. You wrote a piece about toxic Latinas, and you kind of trace it back to quinceañera culture. And I remember seeing some of those ceremonies. I used to live in Houston, and I just know exactly what you're talking about. I had worked in some scenarios at that phase of my career. So, do you think that toxic culture, first of all, how pervasive is it from your experience living down there? And then do you think it increases the propensity for people to just like say, well, okay, I'm just going to have a side girl on so I don't have to deal with you?
I'd say that's like one of many things that I would say. The quinceañera culture is just one of many things that I think adds the toxic Latina culture.
Yeah, what are some others?
But that, and I say I have like a whole piece on time in Latin America, where Latin Americans just don't respect time. And I mean, I got a lot of backlash from this, but I said that Spanish is just not a precise language. Spanish is a very emotional language from the start. Okay. You can go through certain concepts, like let's say with weather, you do have hot and cold in Spanish, but then in English, we've got, cool, chilly, nippy, freezing. There's a bunch of description words in between just hot and cold.
Okay.
Spanish does not have those words in like common language. You will only find those words in like poetry type things. Between that, people just use like, is it chilly outside? Like, no, it's un poco frío, like it's a little bit cold, or like it's very cold, or it's kind of cold. There's not very specific words for things like time. People can say buenos dias is good day, but buenos dias is also used for good morning. There's not a delineation between like morning at 6 a.m., 4 a.m., and up to noon. It's just all good day. Good afternoon is buenas tardes, and that's just like later. Tardes is not the word for afternoon, so that concept just isn't really there for like early afternoon, late afternoon, like evening. The words like exist, but you'll never hear anybody actually use them because it's just not a common like situation. So part of that is the reason I say like Latinos just always late. It's not that they're always intentionally late. I mean, sometimes they are, but if the concept of those time hacks just aren't within your language, you're not going to conceptualize those the same. So there's just like a disrespect for time within Latin culture in general.
Okay.
So from like the American standpoint, or like the Western English speaking standpoint, you just view it as like these people just are always late, but their view of time is just not as like specific as the American viewpoint of time or the English speaker's viewpoint of time. So that's like one reason. But then the quinceañera part is just, the American culture does not have something that I guess gives like a sense of like you are an adult that early on. Like we have a sweet 16, but the sweet 16 is not like you're on your own, you're a woman. It's more of like this is just like an event to mark as a party date. And the sweet 16 in America is not something where people are saving years and years for these events to buy dresses and set up functions, stuff like that, the way that quinceañeras do. And I think that the same way, like if you just give somebody a entitlement complex, like very, very early, they keep that through life. So if you give them some event at, 14, 15 years old, that's like, hey, you are a princess, they kind of just hold that entitlement throughout the rest of their lives and never goes away. And that's what I think is kind of like an aspect of why some of them just act like that.
Do you think that, current pop media helps that or exacerbates that?
It probably just exacerbates it. I mean, it's not something that's like a new concept. I mean, quinceañeras have been in existence forever. And I mean, even before pop culture, you still had the same, like, spicy Latina stereotype.
Okay.
But that's also where I come into the language aspect, where I say, like, because English has so many descriptive words, a Spanish speaker, even if they learn English, they're often not going to use those words. But in Spanish, so many of those concepts are up to interpretation, where it's interpreted, or my theory is like it's interpreted more that person is, quote, spicy Latina or over emotional. But I say it's not necessarily that. It could be partially that, but it's simply because you're interpreting the words without the ability to actually like have those concepts in your language also.
Okay. Wait, so are you Mexican American? Like, did you have the exposure beforehand?
I'll pass on that question.
Okay. Or generally of Latin origin?
I'll say that my family did live in Mexico for a period of time.
Okay.
But
So
I won't confirm or deny
fair.
like whether I'm Mexican or if I'm from another Latin American country.
Let's just say you adapted to the local culture. Now that you kind of like seen that toxic side, have you met any women in Mexico who you deem wife material?
I mean, on that side, I'll like bring up one again. I'll say that the toxic aspect is partially that I think that a lot of people don't know how to interpret the language because it's such a emotional language because there's not as many descriptive words. But then I also say, unlike, quote, the West, that, I don't know, toxicity, if that's what people would want to call it, is much less pronounced from the American, like, standpoint. Like, let's say you have a toxic individual, period, on the American side. They're going to lean much more to the feminist aspect or, the newer age feminist aspect of things. They're like, I'm not doing anything for a man. I'm not cooking, cleaning, blah, blah, blah. Like, you need to just do everything for me. Everything that's yours is mine, but everything that's mine is still mine. Versus the Latin American aspect is still, they're like, yes, that person is going to be very emotional, but you're still going to have somebody that's interested in, cooking and doing stuff like that for you. Like, I kind of make a joke that, that a girl wants to be serious when she just starts doing random errands around your house. Like, it's to the point where sometimes I have to tell her, like, yo, don't go in the kitchen. Like, don't clean up anything. Like, it's fine. Or, like, I've had, girls sleep over and, like, I come into the office and start doing work and I come back and, like, she's made up the bed and stuff like that. I'm like, you don't need to make up my bed. Like, it's not... Like, you don't have to, like, why, like, put the mop down. Like, you don't need to be doing anything like that. Like, I've got a maid. Maybe it looks dirty now, but I'm telling you, the maid's going to come tomorrow. Like, don't worry about that stuff. So, like, yeah, that person may be, like, overly emotional from the American standpoint, but they're still, like, very loving, caring.
I got you. Okay.
A lot of aspects where it's like that trade-off works because at least they're not being an asshole in the toxic sense. They're just being
right.
Very, quote, passionate about things like that. Like, I'll also say I won't condone necessarily, but I mean, it's just the way of life. If you're, a bachelor, that you're going to probably have multiple women, where it's not that she's upset because there's another girl. She's upset because she came and saw that some other girl cooked for me.
I see.
And I'm like, now I'm getting cussed out because there's Tupperware in the refrigerator, and she's like, I know that you didn't cook that. Like you have some other girl here cooking for you, and it's like you're not mad that there's other girls. You're mad that the other girls are doing relationship things for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I could see that. There's definitely I don't know. It's good and bad. I mean, that's I've always admired Latin culture. Like I was just tended to be drawn to Latin women and Asian women too. I married one, so that was always attractive to me. The toxicity thing, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's not like a cut and dry thing. It's one particular descriptive word that needs to be taken in context. There were definitely some experiences that I had when I was a bachelor that I'm reminded of by some of the stuff that you write about, like how to throw a party and and this and that. And man, like I actually think that some of those stuff that you wrote about, I think it could dramatically help someone's life. And I wanted to talk about it here because you've done it. Presuming you did it stateside, but also built this circle for yourself in Mexico City. But a lot of young physicians in training kind of have this problem, right? Like they're working a lot, they're going about dating in like totally the wrong way. But you have a thread where you break down. I could tell. I had a hunch that you were a logistics guy because of the level of detail that you put in there to like throw a party. I was just like, man, this okay. I think I know where this guy's coming from. But could you summarize some of the points that you talked about in throwing a party in a new city and why you think it's such a good idea? Just a long-term play.
Yeah, with that in mind, I'd say you could probably read everything that I write from a logistics officer standpoint in the terms of the level of detail that I'm going to go through the thought process. Because like one of the like things that I thought was just a given, but people found hilarious, is that I said to manage the toilet paper in your house. Like, if you're going to throw a party and your intent is to invite 30 people, if 20 of those people are going to be girls, you have to realize that women run through toilet paper way quicker than men. So, I mean, that was like as a captain at some point, you're going to have a barracks, so you're managing the barracks. You see all of the funds and everything that goes off. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why are we ordering like pallets of toilet paper for these people? So when it came to, how am I going to throw a party, I'm like, all right, so I'm going to delegate those tasks out. Like, okay, one of my friends you're in charge of, you just get the alcohol. Another person just gets the food. Okay, a couple of you guys have to do a detail. We're going to come to the house and we're going to clean up everything, the day before and rearrange some furniture because like this is, an inspection. Let's say the commander's coming through. You got to make sure everything is like in shape. So yeah, I'd say, you start with, you find a core group of solid friends, delegate some tasks out to them and how you want the party. Like, everybody's going to have to invite X amount of people. You figure out the average schedule. Some people just aren't going to show up to your meeting. So if you're going to try to get 20 people, you probably should be inviting like 50 because you have to assume that like it's possible half the people just don't even show up, even if they say they'll show up.
Right.
And like, how do you source the people? I mean, I source them from everywhere. I say, you could start on like dating apps and whatnot, which is kind of a counterintuitive thought process that a lot of quote dating people would talk about. Is I say like I have no problem getting on the apps and telling girls like, hey, like I'm interested in being friends.
Right,
like,
right.
I'm finding people in the city. Like I'm learning stuff. Like if it works out, it works out. But I'm not purely just trying to find a date.
Right.
So if I find 4 or 5 chicks that are decently attractive, I'm just gonna friend zone them, and I'll friend zone like a bunch of girls with the intent that we got more attractive friends, or at least equally attractive friends, hopefully, and then have all of them come to the party also.
Yeah, I think you could just highlight and bold that that principle right there. So to my audience of young training doctors, stop trying to hump every girl that you run into, man. Like you gotta be a little more strategic about it, like just make some high quality friends. And trust me, girls like to have a good time. They like to meet people. They need a place to hang out. They want your masculine energy, but stop trying to bang everyone.
From from the doctor standpoint, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of girls that are interested in dating, hanging out with the doctor. So it makes a lot of sense, especially considering you don't have a lot of time sometimes, that you can friend zone a lot of these people.
Absolutely, yeah.
And use them to learn about like where people are going. Because if you ask a group of guys, what's the best club to go to, what's the best bar, they're going to give you one, venue. But if you ask a group of girls, they might give you a completely different venue where a lot of girls go to that venue, but a lot of guys don't go. And they're going there intentionally because there's not as many guys going there.
No, absolutely.
And now you're the odd person out, with a group of girls. And I mean, then that's where like the masculinity part comes in. Like, of course there's going to be somebody that's going to be like, oh, it's a dude hanging out with 4 girls, he must be gay. But then it's just like, no, if you're, as long as you're secure with your masculinity and that standpoint where it's like, I'm fine going out with, 4 or 5
absolutely.
girls. Like,
sure.
Like these girls are now potential wing women for me.
Absolutely.
And now I'd say on the juggling, demanding career timing aspect, it's like, you can be selective with where you go. Like I may write a guide on, how to throw a party, and I may talk about social circle things, but those are also like highlights of life, you could call them. The average day is still going to be, me working or me just, going to the gym and eating and stuff like that. I'm not going to go out to a party or event or anything like that every week. Like I may go out every other week or sometimes like, once a month. And that's kind of just like a part of life. You still have to get your career aspects in hand. Like if you focus all on just social aspect, you're never going to get your career where you want it to be. And you're never going to have the freedom to do what you want to do after that either. But I think people just assume they're like, oh, I'm really busy, I can't have a social life. And it's like, no, you can create a social life. And even if you're introverted, I say like I am probably more on the introvert side than the extrovert side, where I'm one of the people that'll say like, oh yeah, I'm coming to the party, and then I never show up. And it's not about like the time. It's not about the amount of time that you spend doing something. It's still about the quality of time, where like it almost will be a benefit. I've noticed it being a benefit where I may come to one event a month, but that one event is where people are going to spend all their time like trying to get to know me and talk to me, because they know that, he shows up to an event and then dips out before everybody starts drinking heavy and stuff like that. So, if I was on the doctor's side, I would do the same thing. I would be like, hey, I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to shake hands, kiss babies and whatnot, and then I'm dipping out because, I've got stuff to do in the morning. I'm not going to be out here drinking till 2 a.m.
Yep. It's a waste of time, man. Like I was kind of a similar mindset, and I think once I had commissioned and I was stationed in San Diego, then I had basically handled the income part of my life. I wasn't necessarily rich, but I had a nice apartment. It was like a good lifestyle, but the timing thing,
got that
like
heavy BAH in San Diego.
Oh yeah. Plus I had a roommate to split it with, downtown San Diego, nice place, rooftop patio. It was just like a good place to like have social gatherings. And the points that you talked about in your thread, I learned a lot of those the hard way. But having a consistent monthly dinner party at my condo was the highest ROI activity I would ever do. And it's just like like you had touched on, you just kind of socialize when you get a chance, and you just, befriend, girls from different walks of life, and then you just clue them in on it when you're going to have the dinner party. I think it's a brilliant idea to outsource some of the tedious stuff, like, getting provisions and stuff for the evening to your friends. But, and then I would just like make it 80. I live by the 80-20 rule, at least when it comes to those. I guess for a bachelor, it'd be different now, but dudes are always going to come. You're better off just, inviting your female friends, and then maybe let a couple of your close guy friends, who are trustworthy, kind of have your back, let them know like a little bit closer to the date. But
I did write that. I said, like if I'm going to throw a party, I'm inviting 50 girls,
right?
Sending them the invitation, 2 weeks in advance. And I'm going to send like 3 close guy friends the invitation, and then like 2 days before the party, then I'll invite guys because I know the guys are always going to show up.
Yeah, they're going to show up.
So if you invite 50 girls, 20 of them can show up. You invite 3 guys, 3 of those guys are going to show up, and then the day before I'll throw out an invite to 4 or 5 other guys to kind of even it out, so it's not just a house strictly full of girls, and then it looks like you set this up. Well, I mean, you did set it up, but
right.
the girls would be like, yo, there's like 4 guys here, and that actually happened like the first like big party that I threw at my house here in Mexico City. Like all the girls showed up, so it ended up being like 16 girls or 16 to 18 girls, and there was 4 guys, and one of the girls came in and like called me out. She's like, I see what you did here, and I was like, no, I didn't plan it like this. It's just my guy friends didn't show up, but in reality, I just figured like that many girls wouldn't actually show up, and it would still be even.
But okay, so let me ask you this: when she brought that up, it's not as though she was complaining about it. She was just pointing it out.
Yeah, she was complaining. She was pointing it out as, I mean, I had already kind of had like a player bachelor representation. So I mean, the girls that are going to come, they know what they're going to get.
Right. It's not.
But she was just kind of like, yo, it looks like you set this up. There's like 4 guys here, and there's 16 girls, and it actually made the party like not as good because now there's so many girls, like the guys can't get a word in. The girls are going to separate themselves and talk amongst themselves. There's a period where there's like 10 girls in the living room dancing. It's like, there's like one, now it looks awkward for that one guy to kind of like try to get in there and like dance.
I see.
Period.
Well, in that case, it's still not difficult to get more guys to show up.
You've got to even it. Like you've got to even it a little bit. Otherwise, now who am I to argue with 10 girls on what song they want to play next? Like I don't have any say in this. Like I don't want to listen to the same Bad Bunny song 4 times in a row. But like what can I do now?
That's amazing. But dude, bottom line is that so the reason that I think your message, our message now is that this resonates really well with the young professional. Is that I see so many young doctors that get married to the wrong person because they do not have choice with women. They just settled for the most, and this isn't unique to medicine. It's just a very common thing in the West, all over the world. It's just, guys, they kind of find themselves in this situation, and you only know this because you end up working with them and you hear them talk about it. It's like, dude, why'd you lock yourself into this? Whereas that strategy, that starts 10 years prior. With events like you just talked about. It's just that, so you describe yourself as a little bit more on the introvert side. So am I. I mean, I'm a pathologist. I sit in a room with a microscope, but I enjoy it, but a lot of people wouldn't. But that loud party guy, kind of extrovert, that's not me. And I know a lot of people that are in a similar boat, and the concepts that you talk about in that thread if they were 25 years old, looking to expand their social circle. I'll paste the link to that in the show notes. But I think that's really high yield information, dude.
I'll say I can burn out at my own party where I've taken a nap at my own party. Woken up.
Same.
woken up and there's like music still playing in my house.
Yep.
And I go in the living room and there's still like 5, 6 people like on the couch in my living room. And I'm like, yo, what the hell? Like, y'all are still here? And I'm like, at no point did nobody think like, yo, where's the owner of this house at? But like that's where it is for me. Or like I can be so introverted where like I'm burnt out of my own party. I'm gonna go take a nap for a little bit and come back.
Yep.
And I say that because like you don't have to be the extrovert party guy that has to jump around and keep everybody busy. It's
right.
Like the party will regulate itself. You just have to host it. And at the end of the day, the host typically always gets the most status because, like, it's your event, it's your house, or it's your wherever you did it. So people are going to remember it as like he's the person that
it's
put
his
on the show.
Bowtie's party, it's Chuck's party. They remember that and they associate that good experience with that, and that you took on the risk, you took on the logistics, all that stuff. That's leader activity. So. And it's like super.
And that would be like an officer concept. It's like, I'm going to make the plan. I'll show up at the beginning of the mission, but then I may disappear for the rest of the day.
Right.
I'll just show up to make sure that nobody like accidentally shot themselves or something like that. I guess it's not my job to be on top of things all the time. So I still kind of run every aspect as if I was the officer. Like I'm supposed to be, what is it, like heard but not seen.
Right. No, absolutely, man. A high ROI skill, and one that I think every 20-something young male should learn how to do. In these times, so let me just scan through this. We covered a lot of ground, dude. Health data on WhatsApp. Nobody gives a fuck. Meeting women in Mexico. Meeting women all over the world. Oh, yeah. The one. So I actually have a buddy from fellowship who his family's from Guadalajara, and I think he actually moved back to be with that laboratory. I was just curious, have you been there, and what's it like in Guadalajara? The Western news only shows like the negative stuff, so what's the upshot?
So I'd say compared to Mexico City, Guadalajara is much cheaper. Well, maybe not much, but I'd say like you probably get a 25% discount versus Mexico City. There's much fewer tourists. So, I mean, if you're trying to get somewhere where you're more in the quote culture, there's much fewer tourists in Guadalajara to deal with. At the same time, that means if you're not at least, some way proficient in Spanish, it's going to be a whole lot harder because there's going to be much fewer English speakers in a place like Guadalajara.
Okay.
And I would say like it doesn't give the same social bang for the buck, I would say. I mean, you're still going to have a great social life if you want to have one, but there's just not as much going on in Guadalajara. Like that's my retirement plan actually, is like I would buy like a horse ranch outside of Guadalajara and just live out there and for the rest of my days.
Hell yeah.
I guess. So I just wouldn't call it a starter city. Like I wouldn't necessarily call Mexico City a starter city. For a lot of people it is, because they can easily stay in a tourist bubble and, never learn Spanish, speak English to everybody. But you can easily branch out, 15, 20 minutes outside of the tourist bubble, and then you're in just, like I live in a neighborhood where I'm the only foreigner, like in my building. I don't really see a lot of foreigners on the streets as much, but I can still walk, 15 minutes and see all the tourists and whatnot walking around. Guadalajara, you're kind of just like, you're Mexican at that point. You're not going to just be hanging out with purely tourists.
Got it. Okay. So you had mentioned a horse ranch outside of Guadalajara. So the first thing that strikes me as someone unfamiliar with the area is concern for safety. And even if you do speak Spanish or enough to get by, what parts of that area would you avoid? Not just Guadalajara, but generally, like what cities should, somebody who's a secondary Spanish learner avoid if they're going down there for the first time?
Honestly, now this could possibly be me also living here for a while, but I don't find any safety issues. There's more of a, don't start nothing, won't be nothing kind of aspect where don't argue with the dude with the man purse in the bathroom. Don't bother a guy with, red bottom shoes on or something like that. But outside of that, I think it would be very hard to really get into trouble, especially, let's say, also just, I'm not going to say don't do drugs, but if you do drugs, just watch how you do drugs. Cause
okay. Yeah. Don't be an idiot about it.
If you don't do drugs, you'll probably never run into somebody that's going to be violent for anything.
Okay.
The worst crime that's happened to somebody that I know personally is a friend of mine was sitting at the street on his phone, and somebody on a motorbike rode through and grabbed his phone out of his hand. And that was more of a you probably shouldn't do that in any city. You probably shouldn't stand at the corner of the street with your phone just open where a bunch of motorcycles are riding by. But outside of that, I'd take buses to random cities. I like to just travel to small areas, like archaeological sites and stuff like that.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'll hop on the bus, because, no foreigners, no anybody on this bus or anything like that, and I'll go to a random city
nobody's ever bothered me. I haven't had any trouble.
That's phenomenal. So,
And that's like significantly different than the stories you hear.
yeah, that's very, that's, yeah.
You know, like
that's
Colombia and stuff like that. People getting drugged. Like I've never heard of a case of somebody getting drugged in Mexico City. In the last 3 years, the only time I've heard somebody having drugs was, I'm pretty sure it was their own drugs and they just fucked up themselves.
Right. The stories, I think I've come across 5 or 6 in the last couple of years just in the lay press up here. And it always has to do with like some American dude that was out at 3 a.m. And I can't imagine myself being out at 3 a.m. Just not my personality, but it's just like, of course you're doing drugs,
Yeah,
like
or if you there you go. If you drink, a lot, then you're the person that would typically try to like get drunk and then go home. Yeah, maybe that's going to put a target on you higher percentage than if you were in America. But in the same spectrum, like I've been outside, 2, 3 a.m. walking by myself. Nobody's bothering me either. But if I'm out that late, like I'm not drinking, I'm probably like walking to 7-Eleven or something like that.
I see. Okay.
But at the same time, I say like I don't really. That's probably why I say that like my budget is lower than some other people's, because I don't really drink that much. Or if I do drink, like I'm not gonna drink to excess to where I'm spending a bunch of money just in alcohol. Like some people can easily spend $100 or more a night in alcohol. Like I'll have a beer, 2 beers, and then people will catch me drinking sparkling water with lemon for the rest of the night.
Yep.
And they'll never know it's not a vodka and soda.
That was, I fucking love it, dude. That was, we're cut from a similar mold, man. I used to do that shit too.
Probably the only time I've been ever stopped by police was once when I had a friend visit, and I think that they just assumed it was like, 2 tourists, and they stopped us, and they pulled out my wallet and realized that like I've got a residency card, then they kind of just backed off and left eventually.
Oh, wow.
And the other time was, again, like I was walking around at like 2 a.m. from a 7-Eleven, and the cop kind of just followed me home, and eventually we got to a light, and he rolled down his window, and he asked if I was okay. And it was clear like he was trying to check to see if I was drunk, because if I was drunk, he would have got out and tried to, finesse me out of some money, but he realized like, this dude's not drunk. He's just, for whatever reason, walking outside in shorts. And he rolled his window up and drove away.
Okay.
But outside of that, like literally, I've never even had an issue where I'm like, I feel scared.
That's awesome.
If I'm gonna be scared, it's because there's a street dog walking around the street, and I'm like, I don't want to get bit by a street dog.
They tend to come out in the wee hours, right?
Or like pop up on somebody's roof or something like that and start barking, and I'm like, oh fuck, like this is gonna be it. He's gonna bite my neck off or something.
What about in like unexpected, where there's like a stretch of 2 or 3 city blocks that are really messed up, like because you have that anywhere in the world, right? Like you'll have like a nice neighborhood, and then like in Dallas, like there'll be like some really shitty stretch of like 3 blocks. Does that happen in your area, or is it pretty well guarded off?
I'd say not really in my area, but I've been to areas like that, and I say my only barometer is how much graffiti is on the wall. Like
Fair.
It can be the most run-down neighborhood. Like I've got some friends that live in some pretty sketchy-looking neighborhoods, and I get dropped off in an Uber, and the Uber can't even go down the street, so you got to walk a couple blocks like into the neighborhood.
Okay.
But as long as there's not a bunch of graffiti on the buildings or on somebody's house, I'm like, it's probably just a lower income neighborhood. That's all.
Got you. Okay. That is very refreshing to hear, because quite frankly, there's American cities that are scarier than that.
Now, I'd ask like the user, the listener, to the question of like, how tall are you? I acknowledge that there could be a reason where nobody ever bothers me is because like I'm over 6 foot in Mexico.
Okay.
So like I don't blend in simply being that tall. Like I blend in enough where people are like, we know that he's not from around here, but he doesn't look completely off.
Okay.
But being over 6'2" in Mexico, that's the reason why like the average thief is like, I'm not going to bother him because he probably is going to catch me. Or like he might be able to fight back. But yeah, maybe if you're like a very short person, like maybe you'd have a different experience. But outside of that, I really don't have any friends that are like short enough where I think that they have a negative experience either.
Got it. Well, that's fantastic, man. That's all I have for right now. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I think it was very useful to the people listening. And you can check out Bowtied Passport. I'll put it in the show notes. .substack.com. Bowtied, you got anything else that people could link to?
I'd say, yeah, just
That's
Twitter, Bowtied Passport at Twitter, or the website, bowtiedpassport.io. Like everything else, I've got like Instagram and whatnot, but I barely use them, so
Sweet.
there's no reason to go and follow me when I've got like 12 followers. Everything that I have is on Substack, the website, and Twitter.
Excellent. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and we'll see you out there on X, and we'll catch you in the DMs or something. All right, man.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Talk to you another day.
Bye-bye. Back down in the sauna of Dallas, Texas, enjoying it. That was another episode of the 3 Deeper Cuts podcast, your lifestyle magazine for the practicing surgical pathologist, for the practicing community physician deep in the trenches of medical practice, bringing you high-signal content fueled by 10% buffered neutral formalin. I hope you enjoyed listening today. That was Bowtied Passport. If you like this content, subscribe to the newsletter at 3deepercuts.substack.com. Other articles that I put out are on chuckgmd.substack.com, and some more stuff on Medium, and then, of course, on X, chuckgmd on X. So I enjoyed that conversation, and I think you're going to be seeing Bowtied Passport again on future episodes of 3 Deeper Cuts. And also on future episodes of 3 Deeper Cuts, I'm going to give you some summaries of the books and articles that have helped me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, present day, the books and articles that I keep rereading to achieve the goals that I'm trying to achieve, both in medicine and outside of medicine. So I'm excited to bring you these podcasts. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and on Substack. I also upload the long-form audio to X as well under the handle 3 Deeper Cuts. So check it out and tell your friends. This podcast is dedicated to helping the physician 5 years behind us, 10 years behind us, and so on and so forth. And we hope to make it as valuable as possible to the young physician on the come-up to crush burnout. I don't even like using that term, but it seems to be popular in the professional circles. Burnout need not exist. This podcast is dedicated to helping the young physician learn all the street knowledge that they need to know to excel in medicine and make this a joyful career, because I found a way to make that happen, and I'd love to share it with you. So have a pleasant evening. Enjoy your friends and family, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.